Beautiful. Really beautiful. I always dare you to sit still during that one. "40 years ago, 1982, Bobby and I purchased our first house. It was new to us, but it wasn't new. It was a fixer-upper in a row of houses that had been built just after the Civil War. We loved living in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a great spot. We loved living there. You can applaud if you want, it's all right. But I don't do it for that reason. We love living there because you could walk everywhere. I mean, we walked to the Central Market where you could buy all the Amish goodies. We walked to the theater. You could walk to the department store. You could walk to the main hospital in town. Could walk certainly to the church where I was ordained and served as an associate pastor the first 4 years after I finished at seminary. It was a great place to live and to begin our married life. Our house was across the street from the rectory of St. Anthony's Church. It's a church that was begun in 1870. It was actually built for the German Catholics who had settled in Lancaster. You know, Pennsylvania was welcoming to folks who came from all over and all religious backgrounds, and so Lancaster reflected that. And St. Anthony's was a vibrant church, is, I suppose. I don't know for sure. But it's certainly a vibrant church with a parish school and many appropriate ministries for a small town, for people who lived in a small town. But what I remember most about St. Anthony's, I haven't talked to Bobby about this, but I'm sure she's going to agree. What I remember most about St. Anthony's are the bells. The bells. The bell tower rises 115 feet above the street. The church bells that were cast in a Baltimore foundry were designed to be heard blocks and blocks and blocks away, neighborhoods away. And we lived probably about 200 to 225 yards from the top of the bell tower. Whenever they rang it, we knew it. Now, it wasn't quite as dominating, and it wasn't quite as overwhelming as being next to train tracks, but it was that same kind of idea. Well, and they rang more often, the trains going by. They rang many times a day, sounding the hours, calling people to the early morning mass. They sounded it 3 times a day, what they call the Angelus bell, that would call their parishioners to prayer. Wherever they were, stop now and pray. Any of you have a Roman Catholic background, you may be aware of them. You know what I'm talking about. And the way they signaled that was a triad of rings with a pause and another triad. It's like 9 of them. That was the morning, and then there's another time for the midday. At night, they did all 9 in rapid succession. After living there a while, you grow somewhat accustomed to having those bells punctuate the day and calling people to all the daily and weekend services. And then the bells pealing for weddings and special occasions. Oh my goodness. An 1895 history of the church, written, it was only 25 years old at the time, tells the story of their bells in detail. They had names for them. It tells who donated them, how much they weighed, when they were hung and dedicated. And they were old. And this is a drawing of their bell tower and the 4 bells that were up there, made by one of their parishioners. The 2 smallest bells weighed 600 and 900 pounds respectively. And they were both donated by the unmarried sister of the founding priest of the parish. That's a sizable gift, right? A big gift from her and her family. The largest bell, weighing nearly a ton, is called Te Deum. And some of you, maybe who've sung in a choir, would know that Te Deum refers to a Latin phrase that means, God, we praise you. The second largest bell, which weighs just a little bit over 1,200 pounds, is called De Profundis. In Latin, it's a phrase that means out of the depths. Out of the depths. And St. Anthony's church historian explained that De Profundis bell was sounded to announce the death of somebody in the church. That's the bell that was rung repeatedly to alert people to a death. It's a very ancient practice. And through centuries, church bells had a critical role for a village or a town or small city. Realize this is before Twitter and internet and before emails and before phones. And yes, in some cases, bells starting about 600, 700, way before there were printing presses, right? So the manner of communication was dependent on bells for making announcements or alerts to the congregation or to the community. Very significant. The slow, solemn, measured tolling of the De Profundis bell told anyone within earshot that someone has died. That ancient practice was the basis for one of the most famous lines by English poet John Donne, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare. And you've no doubt heard these lines before. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Now, John Donne was not trying to provide a book title for Ernest Hemingway 3 centuries later. And he wasn't just being melodramatic. He believed and he wrote that we have a metaphysical connection with others in this human drama. And every death in some fashion impacts and diminishes, particularly if you're in a village and within hearing of the bell, you're close enough that it's somebody that you know. And it affects you. You don't need to send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Just a few moments. At the end of the service, in conjunction with communion, we will be scrolling the names of persons from North Lake who have died since this time last year. That's a part of the communion of saints. That's a part of what today is about. And posting of their names in this fashion, it's not news, it's not making an announcement, but in some ways it resembles the tolling of the De Profundis bell. It stops us where we are to ponder and to reflect and to understand how we are also impacted. We recall those we've loved and lost, including many who will not be on the list that is on the screen. Many others for all of us. It's an occasion for us to ponder our mystical connection with the communion of saints. And in this communion, All Saints Sunday, we're also reaching out for a connection with the Lord. De Profundis, out of the depths. You see, that is the opening phrase of Psalm 130 and a prayer that is derived from that psalm. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered, may be worshiped. Some with us today cry out, quite literally, from the depths of grief, right now. Some are crying out because they're losing their grip on earthly life. the physical, the mortal, the fleshy existence we have from birth to death. Others are crying out of the depths because of a loved one fighting cancer or Parkinson's or dementia or congestive heart failure or any of a number of other conditions that are diminishing life and affecting household, family, relationships. We're scarcely beyond the most ominous, consequential pandemic of our lifetimes. And there are millions of people around the world still in grief, crying out from the depths for persons lost to COVID-19, like this wall that we saw in London, this National COVID Memorial Wall facing the Thames River. Goes on and on and on. Hearts posted with the names of persons lost, in many cases little prayers alongside them or with it. This is a natural, universal response. This kind of thing is to, we need to do something to remember. We participate today in the resolve of Psalm 112, verse 6, which is our title today. They will be remembered forever. This is actually the second line of that verse. And Pastor Lynn read the entire psalm. And I will tell you that the entire psalm warrants further reflection. It could be a great one to teach on throughout an entire service. It prompts many thoughts. I will just tell you that that pronoun refers to the righteous. And there's a statement in the line ahead of time that signifies those who are righteous, which means to be in a right relationship with God and a right relationship with others around us. And there's this notion of, to live up to this standard, to kind of try to have the character and the characteristics that are pleasing to God. But we know the gospel is always saying to us, it says repeatedly, that we cannot do that on our own. We just can't. It's by the blood of Christ that we are rendered and reckoned as righteous. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith." And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God. It's grace. I want to acknowledge that because I also want to say that the day is huge. It's inclusive, it's large, it's beautiful because of Jesus, not because we earn that memory. But today we're really focused on remember. They will be remembered forever. The Israelites were repeatedly told to remember the Lord and His commandments. You see, memory is at the core of our faith. Remember. When Jesus was at His Last Supper and teaching His closest followers about the new meaning of breaking bread and the cup of salvation, He said to them, "Do this in remembrance of me." The very next day, on the cross, the thief beside Him pleads with Jesus, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." I don't want to be crass, but let's face it, He wasn't asking Jesus to work on memory exercises. He wasn't hoping that Jesus would remember His name or recognize His face. Now, what's occurring here? What does this represent? Jesus, remember me, is not a matter of recall. It's a matter of connection. To remember is to maintain connection. Maintain connection. And that penitent thief is asking to have a connection with Jesus in His kingdom on the other side of the boundary of death. They will be remembered forever as a statement of faith, not only because of our human memory, not just because we will remember them, but because they can anticipate that God, the Lord, will remember them forever. Our memories are frail. They fail. God doesn't forget. And Jesus, and when he gives us the sacrament of communion, he invites us to remember to maintain our connection with him until we join him at the feast table in his kingdom. Come and keep connection with me. Stay with me. They will be remembered. You will be remembered. I will be remembered. On our drive north from England into Scotland last June, the highway skirts around to the west of the small town of Lockerbie. The world was horrified in 1988 when a terrorist bomb ripped apart Pan Am Flight 103. It was on its route from London to New York City. All 243 passengers and 16 crew on board were killed, as well as 11 who were on the ground where it hit. The explosion detached the nose from the rest of the aircraft. The main structure of the fuselage and wings dropped from 31,000 feet. 19,000 of those feet had dropped vertically. And it dropped into a quiet residential neighborhood. Most had settled into their homes for the evening in the December darkness when the wreckage landed, creating a massive crater by impact. It was also loaded with more than 200,000 pounds of jet fuel, which erupted in a fire that was seen by other pilots for miles and miles in every direction. The neighborhood was obliterated. That event affected many people. I think it's the first terrorist event that really gripped me. We had a young family, and I was a pastor, and I just remember how affected I was by that episode, by that loss, by that tragedy, by that terrorist act. I've also since learned that one of our North Lakers was working that day at the London airport when Pan Am Flight 103 stopped there, and he helped to load passengers and onto that plane. On our way north, Bobby and I exited the highway, and with our GPS and some determination, we located that memorial garden. If you look at it on Google Maps, it's there. It's called Lockerbie Memorial. But I'll guarantee you this, it ain't easy to find. I'm pretty good with directions. It's not easy. It's on a one-way street, tucked away in a residential area. There is no parking. There are no signs to say you are here or this is it. In fact, we went past it, assuming it wasn't there, and then said, well, let's try a second time around. And we did, and we parked halfway onto a curb, and then we walked back through a small opening in the greens. Because there was nothing to suggest that this must be it, but according to what I was looking at on the map, it's right there. And so sure enough, we walked back maybe 35, 40 yards and around the corner, and then back into a secluded cove of trees, and that's it, with a single bench and stone marker. And somebody had already been there that day and had left fresh flowers beside a bronze plaque on the stone declaring remembrance of those named and all victims of the Lockerbie air disaster who died here 21st of December, 1988. Later that day in my journal, I wrote, I can't imagine what it would be like for a town of 4,000 people to be known the world over for disaster, for terror. To be equated with that instantly by their very name. And it was clear to me then as I realized they don't want tourists here. Nothing is there to invite or welcome people there. It is a sacred place for remembering for those who are right there, who could probably walk there or bike there or knew easily how to get there. We treat it as such, a sacred, holy ground, a place to be and to pray and to remember. They will be remembered forever. They will be remembered forever. And not only by us, but also, and more importantly, by the Lord. You know, that celebrates the connection we have with the Lord, a connection that's sealed by the love and the cross of Jesus Christ. Several days ago, in preparation for today's worship, I went out to North Lake's Memorial Garden. If you're not aware of it, go find it. So let me tell you where it is. It's the north end of our building, outside the wall, wrapping around the edge of the sanctuary. And the gateway faces the parking lot or driveway toward Griffin Avenue. It is a beautiful place. It's a lovely place to sit or wander and reflect and remember. And I've loved being in there a number of times, just for its beauty and for what it signifies. You know, more and more I know the names upon the niches where the ashes are placed, or names of persons who intend for their ashes to be placed there sometime in the future. And some of them I know very well, including one who made a pilgrimage with us to the Holy Land. And in 2018, I remember putting his ashes there and thinking, his earthly pilgrimage is over. His next one begins. The garden has an implicit message. They will be remembered forever. And again, not just by us, but by the Lord, celebrating the connection that we have in the cross of Jesus Christ and by his love. While I was in the garden this week, a monarch butterfly flew past me, landed on nearby blossoms. It allowed me to follow from a distance. I just had my phone with me, but it allowed me to get close enough to take a few pictures. Nothing great, but just, it was such a blessing. I thought, how wonderful that this symbol of the resurrection alights here in all of its glory around the niches and the remains of some we've loved and lost. And it was as if the Spirit of the Lord fluttered by and said, yes, they will be remembered forever. Even on the other side of the boundary, the mystery that we call death. Today I brought with me into worship two books that hold great meaning for me. One was given to me by my Aunt Kitty, my dad's sister. She struggled most of her adult life with schizophrenia. And I was with her numerous times when she was in episodes of confusion and personality disorder. I was also with her other times when you could see her beautiful smile, her radiant faith. She had a spectacular faith. She prayed for me regularly and took special delight in my call to become a pastor. She lived not far away from Princeton Seminary while I was there. And soon after I graduated and began and was ordained, she gave me this little pastoral record book to write down all of the baptisms, all of the weddings, all of the sermons preached, all of the funerals or memorial services conducted, all the special services. And when I filled this up, I went and bought another. And I guarantee you I could serve another 40 plus years and I will not fill this one up. These are precious to me. You may not know how precious they are to me. Here, these lines contain hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of names, persons, precious to the Lord and in their own way precious to me. Like the 10-year-old dying of cancer who said that he wanted to be buried with his stuffed pound puppy. And the 103-year-old that I played golf with who played on his centennial birthday. The diabetic amputee who really taught me how to be pastor to someone who's lost a limb and more. The man who took photos at my ordination, many of which hang in my office in a collage, and who died shortly thereafter at age 67, the same age I am today. The 88-year-old who was bedridden the last 5 years of her life, the entire time that I knew her, but who also had the kind of smile and offered prayers such I've never heard before and will always remember. Being at her bedside, praying for her, and then hearing her pray for me. A history professor who loved to probe my messages and then suggest other books that I could read. Even the 22-year-old who spiraled downward in depression, befuddling his family. They were bewildered as they watched and felt helpless until he took his own life, trying to find a peace of God, a peace in the Lord Jesus Christ that he just seemingly couldn't find in this world. And even my own sister died a week before her 50th birthday. And on and on and on it goes, which is why All Saints Sunday is so precious to me. And why I will set these volumes on that table in just a moment as we do communion. And it's also why I invite you similarly to consider those whose lives have intertwined with yours for a short time or for long stretches. And to remember them. They will be remembered forever. The bell tolls for them and for every one of us. But it sounds the profound, everlasting connection that we have in Jesus Christ. Please pray with me, words that he taught us to pray. The Lord's Prayer. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.